everyone, welcome to our presentation today about new psychoactive substances, or NPS as we're going to be referring them to. NPS is causing chaos in our prison system and are becoming increasingly popular amongst vulnerable community populations. And this continues despite the introduction of the Psychoactive Substances Act last year. Today we're going to talk about why NPS are so popular in prisons, why they're growing in popularity in our community populations, the risks associated with them, and what can be done to help support people who use NPS. Okay. So I'm Hattie, and this is Alex, and we work for RAPT in the Research and Development Department. As it says on the screen, we work with people with drug and alcohol dependence. We work with them in prison and in the community to help them overcome their addiction and lead lives free from crime, as well as drug and alcohol use. We are one of the only substance misuse charities to have an in-house research team, and we continually evidence the effectiveness of our interventions to develop needs-led and evidence-based services. We also have written a number of peer-reviewed papers which have also contributed to the substance misuse and prison research fields.
Okay, so what are NPS? NPS are mood-enhancing chemicals. As Hattie's mentioned, despite the introduction of the Psychoactive Substances Act in 2016, they are still commonly known as legal highs. The term legal highs is misleading, as they are no longer legal, and it can imply that these substances are safe to use, which is often not true. NPS are designed to mimic the effects of drugs such as cannabis, cocaine, and LSD. The appearance of different NPS can vary due to the type of drug. However, very different NPS can also look extremely similar. NPS can come in powder, pill, liquid, or herbal form.
There are loads of different types of NPS, and it can be quite confusing in terms of categorising them, names, etc. So on the screen, we have gone with the categories as defined by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So it may be slightly different to what you've heard, but we thought we would go with them. So we've got synthetic cannabinoids, which are known as spice, which you might have heard of. It's really common NPS used in prisons and in the community. It's made up of man-made chemicals which are bonded to plant material using acetone, which you would find in nail varnish remover. There's loads of other chemicals in there, and these vary depending on batch, but quite often chemicals that are used in plastic and cement are also found in spice. Next up, we've got sedatives. They're also known as depressants, and they're so called because they lower neurotransmission levels and are central nervous system depressants. Then they appear to increase sociability and enhance mood, and some sedatives such as GHB and GBL also produce euphoric stimulant-like effects. So speaking of stimulants, synthetic stimulants are designed to mimic the effects of more traditional stimulants such as amphetamines, cocaine and ecstasy. The dopamine receptors are affected to make the user feel energised, physically active, really chatty and fast thinking, and they can be sold in a number of ways, like Alex has described: powders, pills, smoking mixtures, liquids, capsules. Hallucinogens, they can also be sold in many forms, not just liquids. They can become white or coloured powders. There's many different ways you can get them, and they're designed to act like LSD and magic mushrooms, and the effects include feelings of euphoria, mental and physical stimulation, hallucinations, and unusual body sensations. Dissociatives, they're a form of hallucinations, and they include ketamine and methoxetamine. And they produce feelings of detachment and dissociation, so you feel like you're very separate from what's going on around you. And finally, there are psychoactive substances designed to mimic the effects of traditional opioids such as heroin and morphine. These include crocodile and kratom, and they produce opioid type effects such as pain relief. And as we've mentioned, each category of NPS can come in multiple forms. And a 2016 Home Office report found that over half of NPS users had consumed their substances in herbal smoking mixtures, to give you an idea of what you might see more of.
Okay, so identifying NPS can be very difficult. As shown on screen, there's 3 main reasons for this. Firstly, people don't always know what they've taken. Although users were never 100% certain before the PSA came into effect in 2016, it used to be possible to test branded products and see if these changed in their chemical structures. But now NPS tend to come in unmarked snap bags, so users don't know for certain what they've taken. And this is especially an issue in terms of the potency of the drugs. Anecdotal reports state that older, extra strong batches of NPS have been coming in intermittently as dealers are offloading these in response to the PSA. Also, as with many drugs, one batch can differ dramatically from the next. Dealers in prison are trying to figure out the potency of each batch by getting prisoners to test each batch like a guinea pig. So essentially they get them to take the drugs, see what happens, see the effects, and if there's no adverse effects, then these are sold across the prison. However, the problem with this method is that NPS can affect each individual differently, so you can never be sure how people are going to react to that batch. Secondly, the names for NPS are ever changing. So the reasons for this can be regional variations, emerging substances and different brand names. So the terms on the screen here are all used to describe different synthetic cannabinoids or spice. It can be problematic for emergency services and healthcare and treatment staff to have these different names going around because they're never sure what users have taken and how to respond to this. Thirdly, drug testing can't keep up with the tweaks to the chemical formula in these drugs. So NPS are produced in labs, and before the PSA came into effect, the chemical chemists making them would tweak the compound slightly so they were still legal. This contributes to the unpredictable effects of different batches of NPS. Furthermore, forensic laboratory capacity in most countries isn't adequate, and drug testing isn't widespread across the UK in prisons or community, so we can't be 100% sure of the exact substances that people are taking.
Okay, so instead of overloading you with loads of statistics, we thought we'd play NPS Stats Bingo. So how this works is, can you all see the screen clearly? Yeah? Yeah? No? Yeah? If you can't, come forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question, and based on the numbers on the screen, you've got to guess what the answer is. And if you get it right, you get a bingo. Okay. What percentage of prisoners use or have used NPS? Just shout out.
73%.
Okay, so 70, 90, 100.
Okay, so whoever said 90%, you're right, you get a bingo. It's been estimated that as many as 60 to 90% of the prison population have used NPS.
Okay. Yeah. So the next question, how many NPS are circulating in Europe? So that's how many different varieties. Who said that?
621.
Okay, yeah.
1 million.
Anything else?
4,261.
So 621 is the right answer. Bingo. Yeah, so as of 2015, 621 known NPS was circulating in Europe. It's likely the true figure is a lot higher than this. How many seizures of NPS were there in prisons in 2016?
4,261.
Yeah, bingo. So this has risen by over 30 times since 2011, when there were only 136 seizures, which gives you an indication of the scale of use since then.
Okay, so next question. How many people said they've used NPS at least once?
1 million.
Yeah, bingo. 1 million is right. Woo! Almost 1 million people aged 16 to 59 said they had used NPS at least once. What percentage of 16 to 59-year-olds had used NPS alongside another drug in the last year?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, bingo. Yeah, 85%. Gets easier as you go along because there's fewer to choose from. By what percentage did referrals to RAP services for help with NPS increase within a year?
500.
Yeah, bingo, 500%. We think this is due to the NPS strategy which we introduced, and as a result we have NPS leads, we have NPS harm reduction groups, and we also have a best practice guide for staff, and we think this really contributed to this increase.
Okay, so between 2013 and 2015, how many deaths in prison were attributed to NPS? Bingo, correct.
Yeah, so it's 58, and these are on the increase as between 2012 and 2014 there were 19 deaths, so it's on the rise. Right, you've only got 2 answers left, so in 2015 how many deaths in the community were attributed to NPS?
114.
Yes, correct. And again, this is on the increase, as in 2014 there were 82 deaths.
Last question is probably going to be quite easy. What percentage of prisoners said they use NPS because they are addicted to it?
73%.
Yeah. So yeah, nearly 3/4 of NPS users are addicted to it.
Okay, so where have NPS come from? NPS began to appear on the UK drug scene in 2008 and 2009. Methadone is a well-known example that most of you have probably heard of. There was a lot of media attention on this stimulant. It goes by several names, including MCAT, Meow Meow, and plant food. NPS are usually manufactured in labs in China and India, although smaller scale manufacturers and distributors have been found in the UK. Before the Psychoactive Substances Act came into effect in 2016, NPS were often bought from head shops, newsagents, garages, and takeaways. Now they are more likely to be bought online, on the regular internet or the dark net, with some people often still buying them from street dealers.
It's believed that the popularity of NPS grew due to the reduced quality and purity of street heroin and cocaine. And often people think that NPS are of better quality as they are less likely to be cut. This isn't necessarily true because the people that are manufacturing the NPS aren't always using the appropriate regulatory and quality methods. As Alex just said, the PSA has stopped open sale of NPS on the British High Street, but they are still easily available through street dealers and online. The National Crime Agency estimate that there are around 150 UK websites selling NPS, and this figure fluctuates weekly. On the darknet, so this is a part of the internet that requires encryption software to access, and that ensures anonymity. And there are numerous sites selling NPS. You might have heard of Silk Road. So anyone who has the right encryption software can buy and sell NPS with relatively low risk of getting caught. NPS users make up a small proportion of total drug users in the UK, and they appear to be popular with particular groups of people, so people in rural areas, clubbers, men engaging in the chemsex scene, and vulnerable people such as homeless. And relatively few people who come forward into treatment cited NPS as their primary substance of use. And workers tend to see more of a problem out in the community with clients who are not accessing treatment, such as rough sleepers.
Okay, so street drug surveys conducted by DrugScope, in addition to anecdotal evidence, indicate that the North East is experiencing particularly high levels of interest and involvement in NPS. One possible explanation for this high concentration of use in this region is that prior to the PSA coming into effect in 2016, NPS were more likely to be found on sale in ordinary high street retail outlets such as newsagents and petrol stations, not just in head shops, so there was a high prevalence of use in this area, and this has continued after the PSA has come into effect. Evidence cited in the DrugWise 2016 review on MPS also indicated that MPS use appears to be most problematic in communities experiencing high levels of poverty and deprivation. Evidence has shown that MPS is highly prevalent among younger users in the community, particularly the use of synthetic cannabinoids and methadone. A report from AdAction, published earlier this year, stated some interesting facts around this. So 66% of under 25 surveyed had tried MPS. Most younger users reported using MPS alongside other drugs, so that kind of reflects some of the facts we saw in the bingo there. While the PSA has made these substances harder to purchase, availability from street dealers means that young people surveyed only view this as an inconvenience, and it didn't stop them from using the drugs or didn't seem to deter them from using them either.
So we talked about MPS in the community a bit, and as we mentioned before, it's a big issue in our prisons, which leads you to ask, how do they get into prisons in the first place? And they get in the same way that traditional drugs do, so they get thrown over the wall. This happens a lot in local and remand prisons. Quite often there are gaps in the net, and repeat offenders know where these gaps are, so they just throw them in, and people in there know where to get them. New technology means that drones are increasingly being used to deliver NPS. You may have seen this on the news a while back. And drones can fly directly to prisoners' windows, so it's quite a sophisticated way to get your drugs into prison. In 2013, there were no reports of drones delivering NPS into prisons, but by 2015 there were 33. And this is likely to be a massive underestimation, especially because in more rural areas, they have drone deliveries on a daily basis. So with this happening, it's not really much of a surprise that NPS is so widely available. To combat this, some prison governors have been working with the police to make their prisons no-fly zones for drones. I can't tell you what the technology is, but it's basically some kind of barrier so they can't get into the prison grounds. And early anecdotal reports indicate that this is making it more difficult to get these drugs into prison. Visitors bring them in during visits. This used to be a really big problem before the PSA came into action, because there weren't really any consequences for anyone bringing in an NPS during a visit. However, now, if a visitor brings one in, they are now at risk of being put in jail themselves. However, that doesn't mean that visitors have stopped taking NPS into prison. NPS also get into prison through court. If an offender thinks it's likely they will go to prison following their hearing, they know they are unlikely to get thoroughly searched at court. So we got told by one prisoner that if I've got a court case coming up, I always load up. And finally, snail mail is still used. NPS solutions are increasingly being soaked onto paper. So late last year, we got reports of a new batch of NPS on paper called Death, or Grim Reaper in other places, and that was coming into prisons through the post every couple of days.
Okay, so why are NPS so popular in prisons? A lot of research has been conducted on this topic and has uncovered a range of reasons. So the data presented on this slide and the following slide cover our findings, so RAP's own research, and also research by User Voice. User Voice published a report called Spice the Bird Killer last year. I'd recommend that you look into this. It's a really interesting report based purely on feedback and responses from prisoners. It gives a very honest picture of the impact of NPS on prisoners and the prison system. So, one reason why prisoners use NPS is because it is so normalised in British prisons. Statistics in this diagram here are from December 2016. So, as you can see, a third of prisoners reported using spice in the last month. This compared to 1 in 7 reporting last month use of hooch, cannabis, and heroin substitutes such as methadone. Last month use of heroin was only reported by 10% of prisoners. So as you can see, there's a dramatic difference there in the percentage of prisoners who are using NPS. Additionally, prisoners believed that the majority of their fellow prisoners had used spice in prison. Research conducted by RAPT and the Centre for Social Justice found that prisoners estimated that between 60 and 90% of the prison population used or had used spice. This may or may not be accurate. We're not 100% sure, as drug testing for MPS isn't widespread across our prisons, as we've mentioned. But if prisoners think that others are using MPS, this is likely to encourage them to do the same. So the previous slide covered how easy it is to get MPS into prisons. Part of the reason they're so easily available is the lack of prison officers. So due to this lack of officers, they don't have the capacity to intercept drones or reduce the supply of MPS into prisons. The combination of how easily available MPS are and the mind-numbing effects they can have mean that there is always demand for MPS. Dealers in prisons know that there is a huge market for MPS and can make a lot of money selling them to other prisoners, so until something changes, the popularity for MPS is unlikely to diminish.
So we figured out why they're so popular, because they're so easily available, and all the other environmental factors. But why do prisoners keep using MPS? Or why do they start using them in the first place? So through the focus groups we've conducted, the 4 things on here, I don't know how easy you can read it, are kind of the main reasons why people use. So first of all is curiosity. When people first go into prison, they hear a lot about spice, and they see a lot of people smoking it. And if they go in when there's like a good batch going around, they'll see people having a good time. As one user reported, I just sat there buzzing for a little while, and then you let it wear off and it's lovely. So if you're seeing people and hearing people say stuff like that, you're going to be curious about what this wonderful drug is. Also, because it's so widely available, you get offered it and curiosity eventually takes over. Another reason is boredom. In the user voice report, this was the second most popular reason for using MPS behind lack of testing for it, with over half of users saying they smoke spice to kill time. As one person said, they're bored out of their head, come out at lunch, graft a spliff, fall asleep till 4, come out, graft another one, come back, smoke, and that's the day gone. It seems that people are just smoking spice just because they're bored. Due to budget cuts, prisoners have less access to purposeful activity, and so they're locked up for long periods of time. So in some prisons, it's very common to be locked up from Friday lunchtime all the way through till Monday morning. Another reason is self-medication. Prisoners manage their health concerns with spice when they feel that they can't access healthcare services. Prisoners commonly self-medicate anyway for lower level mental health problems such as anxiety and depression, and these are widespread and don't always get the support they need, which is why prisoners resort to self-medication. So one user said, "It just makes me feel really calm and out of it. I don't feel anxious at all, just relaxed." Another one said, "It made me chill and stopped me feeling depressed and suicidal, so that's a good thing." Self-medication is not a new thing, but the effects of spice are not always calming. However, some prisoners don't think that's a problem. They think that feeling bad is better than feeling nothing, because then they at least feel something. As someone said, a shit feeling is better than no feeling. And finally, MPS are addictive, as we learned in our stats surgery just a minute ago. We found out that nearly 3/4 of prisoners who use spice do so because they are addicted to it. Addiction to spice involves craving, tolerance and withdrawal, not that dissimilar to heroin. As one person told us, you feel as if you're going to lose all your insides. The cramps are unbearable. You have the shakes and sweat. You never knew you could sweat so much. Also, those who go into prison with a pre-existing addiction will use spice instead of their primary substance of choice. This is summed up by a quote that one of the prisoners told us, that one of the reasons that a lot of people start smoking for the first time in prison is because you're so used to getting high off something on the outside. When they come into prison, it's harder for them to get hold of a lot of other things. That's why most people turn to spice.
So just before we go on to the slide, there was one thing I forgot to mention on the other slides. Go back. Okay. So one reason I didn't cover is that prisoners tend to use MPS because there's no test to detect it at the moment, and drug testing is widespread. So the following quote sums up how prisoners feel about this. So one prisoner said, "There is no test, so you can smoke it without getting caught. It's like you're beating the system. There is no test for it, so you won't get punished or lose days or anything like this." So in response to this, some prisons are now able to test for MPS, which will hopefully give us a clearer picture moving forward of the scale of use, as well as hopefully deterring some prisoners from using these substances. H&P Swaleside introduced MPS testing on the 1st of April this year. Wrapped Substance Misuse Services run MPS drop-in sessions at Swaleside, so prior to testing, they were getting a handful of referrals each month, and within 2 weeks of having this MPS testing, they received 45 referrals based on positive test results. So what we can see is that having these tests within prisons has a massive impact on the level of referrals and the amount of people that we can aid in getting help with MPS. Okay. We've now got a clip from a BBC documentary to show you. This is a Panorama documentary that some of you might have seen. It aired, I think, last year. And we're just going to show you a short slide of some users talking about their experiences of MPS and the impact this has had on them, their communities and families.
Shops and newsagents. But before that, Newcastle was already closing these shops down.
I remember smoking it, and I remember having 3 draws of it, and I remember waking up 4 hours later on my bed and then thinking, yeah, that's good, that makes me forget about all my problems.
Paul is 30 and is in and out of homelessness. He's been addicted to legal highs for several years.
I was getting recognition and reward points for the top salesman. I had a nice house, the most beautiful girlfriend ever. I had a scooter. I had everything I could have ever hoped for. 12 months later, I've lost everything. 250, 300.
Is it like heroin, mate, where
10,
like all your money goes on
30,
now?
40, 50, 60, 70, 380 quid's worth.
So would all your money get spent on that?
Not all of it, but a high portion of it, yeah. That's...
So there's not much difference between that and a heroin addiction, really, is there?
Other than I would be more desperate for that than I would be for heroin.
Yeah?
Yeah. And see, the difference is, I wouldn't set about somebody for heroin, I would set about them for that.
You're not a violent person, are you?
Well, you know that.
Yeah.
But when I'm going through withdrawal and I'm not myself, and my brain's not right because of the psychological effects of legal high, you know.
This is where I used to stay when I was homeless. Normally off to the side, over here, in bushes, in a little tent somewhere.
At 18, Chantel became homeless and started taking legal highs.
They blocked everything out. They just made you feel like you had 4 walls around you and forget about your surroundings, where you were, to forget about everything that I was going through. I ended up doing shopliftings and doing crime and that, and stuff I'd never ever even dreamt of doing before. And then that's when I realised that I didn't want it no more.
But once hooked, it's a hard habit to break.
There's less heroin users, less crack users, but now all people want is legal.
It was cider that used to drink to get them through the cold nights, but now they'll just have that and haven't even got a clue who we are, man.
The Psychoactive Substances Act was introduced in May 2016. It banned the manufacture, supply and sale of legal highs across the UK.
What the Act did was got rid of the semi-legitimate sales of these items, both on the internet and on head shops. So they're no longer freely available in that way.
Armed with these new powers, Northumbria Police...
Okay, Does anyone have any initial thoughts about that clip? Is there anything that surprised or shocked you? Is this something that you've seen yourself in users? Any thoughts?
I just want to ask about the banning of legal highs.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there are no legal highs anymore? It's all illegal now?
Yeah, so the Psychoactive Substances Act came into it. No, so users still refer to them as legal highs, and, like I said in that clip, legal, but that's just kind of a term used for them, but they are technically illegal.
Yeah, okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? So, as we saw in this clip, many MPS users state that they use the drugs to escape their problems and reality. Often the grip of addiction to MPS is rapid, and the effects can be devastating on users. So some of the users in this clip discussed how MPS addiction had led them to lose their employment, they'd lost housing, they'd had relationship breakdowns, and it was also touched on how addiction to MPS can lead to violence and crime. So there was a lady there speaking about how she would shoplift to fund her habit. These are all effects that obviously we see.
Sorry, can I just ask you, the first time they take it, is there an increase, or is it like the first time they take it that they're immediately in the drug relationship of it? And also, if they can't get hold of it, what's the detox gap in terms of how, do they?
Well, we know that withdrawal is rapid, and that I don't know if there's exact timescales because the research isn't quite there.
But approximately.
So it will be, the withdrawal will start within I'd say 48 hours to probably 5 days, and then the withdrawal can be quite a dangerous time. There's not loads of research out there, but from one service, because they noticed that people withdrawing from spice, so it kind of, the withdrawal seemed to then last for about 3 weeks in total, and in the halfway through that 3 weeks is when they get particularly depressed and suicidal. So one service has used best practice that they basically go on suicide watch for 4 days because they've noticed so many people having those suicidal thoughts.
And is there any, when they take it for the first time, does the body have to get used to it, or is it just that they're straight into the good feeling?
It really depends on the batch. It really varies. Some people will say smoke some spice and they probably won't really feel anything. They might feel a little buzzed. Other people might kind of lose their heads, so to speak, and start running around throwing things everywhere because they're not consistent and they affect everyone differently. There's not really a set pattern.
But it generally just offers them this kind of ability to get out, feel good, relax.
Mm-hmm. That's what they take it for, yeah. And some of them do that, some of them don't.
But it would again depend on the batch and the type of MPS. We are going to come on to cover some of the physical and psychological effects.
Are you saying the suicidal ideation is more common with these drugs than others?
I don't know, to be honest. It was just a case study that I read that they found that people withdrawing from spice were particularly suicidal in this period in the withdrawal process.
Okay. So, as I was saying, it can also lead to violence and crime. So, users committing crime to fund their addiction. Obviously, this is nothing new. We know that with traditional drugs, these patterns of outcomes, we see these across types of drugs. So a report published by the Home Office last year showed that some of the most frequently cited reasons for MPS use included their relative availability, price, purity, and consistency. Users often state that MPS is stronger than other drugs, as shown in this clip, and that they feel more mentally addicted to them than to other traditional drugs. Obviously, this is anecdotal evidence, and the research in this field is still developing, as it's quite a new phenomenon. Okay.
So as we've kind of already discussed, this leads us to ask what impact do MPS have? There's still a relatively new group of drugs, so we don't know what the long-term effects are, but the short-term effects can cause long-term problems. There's so many horrific case studies where people have torn off their fingernails, they've ripped off their testicles. Like, the psychosis that comes with it can be really horrible, not to mention the increasing number of deaths each year associated with MPS. And it's important to remember that MPS don't only affect the individual, but they also affect their friends, their families, as well as the wider effects on society and in prisons, on the prison system as a whole.
Okay, so what impact do MPS have? Instead of telling you the impacts that they have, we're going to get you to discuss these in groups. I'm going to assign you to one of these 4 groups, so physical health, mental health, societal effects, and effect on prison services. Should we just do it by number?
I guess so. The front half this side could do physical health, the back could do mental health, you could do society at the front this side, and prison services at the back that side.
Okay, so if you just take 5 minutes, discuss all the possible effects, and then we'll come back and chat.
So, because of the lack of information they have about what they put into their body.
Yeah, I think that might increase the kind of some of the symptoms of mental health. Now that actually it's gone underground, they're now not readily available in the shop where you can they're normally listed as ingredients of like a sachet, like a supermarket, so you know what's in it. Yeah, that's true. It's the bulk of the notes.
Even if they read the ingredients, so there's problem unless they've got some sort of PhD in biochemistry.
Yeah, it's just the big words.
It's a big word in numbers. So in terms of the mental health, some of the two vaccines, especially
especially in withdrawal. I think it would definitely
Because there's no long-term studies and there's no knowledge of what it does. Like, it's like what's the drug where it just stays in your system and you can get a trigger at any time?
It's LSD.
Yeah, I think so. So essentially, that could happen here. You have no idea if it's in your system. You have no idea what it's doing to the brain. It's so complicated.
That could also, like, psychosis, like you said, well, LSD can give you flashbacks at random moments, so you might not know about that happening with these types of drugs.
And especially if you've got an existing mental disability, within them, because it doesn't affect the systems,
I took a course that like a lot of mental illnesses have like a genetic predisposition and then are pushed over a threshold with environmental influences. So if you're already genetically predisposition to like mental illness, then maybe these could also be.
You just have no idea. And I guess with everybody's different as well. And I think the reasons that you need to take it are about your mental well-being. I want to forget about it. More of that, suppressing actually dealing with problems. So it will make those worse, but also.
It's like a short fix, like mushrooms.
Is there any research that has been done
It's relatively new, so that there isn't like a lot. I mean, this is like a really weird like metaphor, I guess, but with veganism as well. There's like only 5 years of data because it's relatively new as well. So they're going to have to study this or let it happen for so long.
It's like and the ways it's great you're not smoking, but at the same time you have no idea what you're doing to your body. It's great. And it's already riddled with whatever by then.
Yeah, but I mean, they've only been collecting data for so long. I guess my point is you kind of have to let it happen in order to do the research on it, because like, otherwise there's no research to be done. Nobody's doing it.
I wonder what the knock-on, like the ripple effect would be of the increase. Like if services are already stretched with just everything else.
Working in the secure settings, even reports from the officers, the main thing is that typical kind of symptoms are paranoia, hallucinations, like we've had one guy think that a helicopter was going to be landing on the outside. Made the whole scene ill people. We've had people
I heard of like people with like chips in their like they think the government is like doing it.
But that's going to have a massive drain on every resource around you. Like your family is insane, but everyone else around you is just getting dragged into it.
No, it's not new. It's not right. It's loads.
Come back, we'll share.
You alright?
Okay. Alright, I'm just going to get going then. So, everyone, are we ready to come back? Yeah? Great, thank you. So you guys had impact on physical health. What did you come up with?
Sleep deprivation, malnutrition, specific organ damage. Some of these things are water soluble, affect everywhere in the body, but maybe specifically kidneys. Physical harm from under the influence of scratching, the obsessive scratching and among yourself, as well as presumably putting yourself in harm's way in terms of accidents and getting beaten up.
Yeah, great. I mean, you covered, I think, pretty much most of it there. This looked a lot clearer on the computer screen, so sorry if you can't read this. So yeah, you covered about the kidneys, the lungs, it's going to all the organs. Bladder damage, that's particularly common with ketamine. Also heart problems, so I think these are more common with the synthetic stimulants, so you've got the racing heart. Other things include hypothermia, overheating, stomach ulcers, and fits and skin rashes. You've kind of got most of them, and then I guess the biggest one also, as we've seen, is death as well. That's an impact on your physical health. Great, thank you.
Okay, so the next group who have mental health was this.
Up there.
Back.
I mean, the full range, so anxiety disorders, mood disorders, psychoses, the short-term effect of taking it, then the sort of withdrawal effects, and unknown sort of organic impact on the brain, and also the impact on any pre-existing mental health conditions as well.
Great. Yeah, again, you've got most of them. Sorry if you can't read these, I'll read them out. So, insomnia, disorientation, psychosis, suicidal thoughts and self-harm, paranoia, hallucinations, anxiety, agitation, memory loss, depression. So, as you mentioned, there's a lot going on there. So, in a user voice survey that I referenced earlier, 60% of prisoners surveyed reported mental health problems were a consequence of smoking spice. So as we can see, there's a real impact here. A report from DrugWise also highlighted that physical and psychological dependency happened quite rapidly, as we've kind of discussed a little bit earlier. And with this onset was rapid, often within weeks. So psychotic reactions, as you mentioned, can result from using spice, especially among individuals with existing mental health disorders such as schizophrenia. Although even individuals with no mental health issues reported psychotic experiences from using spice. These are effects that are historically only associated with powerful hallucinogens like ketamine and LSD. So, a quote from a service user here. So, I ended up in a psych ward for a month after smoking spice. Insane hallucinations, walls and open spaces blacking out to complete nothingness. I literally thought I had gone insane. So as we can see, the effects on physical and mental health are severe and can be devastating.
Okay, so the impact on society group, what did you come up with?
Impact on cost?
Yeah, it was, from an individual, community and society perspective, the ripple out from the individual, the impact on the family, the possibility of the generational inheritance being passed down to children, then with community, society, the economic cost to police, mental health services, ambulance service,
etc. So since NPS have become more popular, emergency services, there's been a sharp rise in the amount of people needing medical treatment as a result of using NPS. In Newcastle in 2014, over 1,100 hours of police time was spent dealing with NPS-related incidents. I think that works out as around like 50-something days in a whole year just on NPS incidents. So yeah, it's having a really big impact on our emergency services. You talked about the family, yes, and the generational, passing it down through the generations. Also, there's also issues around like intimidation and debt from dealers if people can't afford to pay for them. So this can result in stress and anxiety as well as debt for the whole family. And drug treatment services, although NPS users aren't the most, they're not coming forward to treatment as much as more traditional users, more and more people are seeking treatment. And drug treatment services seem to have adapted to this, and there's better knowledge, and with all the kind of publications that have come out, there's more knowledge about best practice and responding to symptoms rather than what you think they might have taken. However, many NPS users don't really see themselves as having a problem, so they're more likely to access another kind of service. So it might be A&E, it might be a sexual health service, and the treatment frontline therefore doesn't just involve treatment substance misuse services. So people in the non-specialist settings have reported that they don't feel confident in identifying, assessing or delivering interventions to NPS users or knowing how to refer to them. Yes?
Can you just ask, the law, is it that they, do they categorise them on the dangerous drugs, like A, B, C?
I haven't seen them doing that so far. I've just seen them categorised as they're just now illegal. But I don't know if they're going to go into that level of detail with them. I think because they don't know enough about them still. Maybe that's why they haven't categorised them.
And the chemicals can be tweaked so easily in the different compounds, so it'd be really hard, I guess, to put them into different categorisations because they can change so rapidly, and as we've spoken about, the potency of different batches can vary so differently.
Okay. Oh yes, we've got a video, another quick video about the impact that it has on the police service. So, it's on the other one, it's on the Google Chrome one. Yeah. Yeah, it's on the right time.
So this is Northumberland High Street, which is obviously our main shopping area. What we began to get is complaints from shop owners and businesses saying that they were being affected by the state that people were in, who were under the influence of lethal highs.
Early last year, the city experienced the worst problems with novel psychoactive substances, now known as NPS.
Individuals were seen being sick in the streets, hemorrhaging, actually having blood from the ears and nose. They were having seizures and fits.
To try to deal with the problems of people collapsing in the city centre, the police, council and ambulance service in Newcastle got together to form a task force.
At the height of the MPS use was large congregations, some of them really vulnerable young people who would hang around this area into the late evenings, also dealing in NPS products in this area.
There used to be a lot of legal high users that used to bother the old people, the children, myself.
What are your views on lethal highs?
What mine? Don't take them because it's bad for you. They kill you.
And have you seen people under the influence of lethal?
Aye, I have.
What have they been like?
They'll be lying on the floor, they'll be lying on the benches. And I like, no, I mean, they'll lie there and they don't talk out there. You think, yeah, man, what's wrong with it?
They'd come over to you with, you know, like a really drowsy look on the face, and you couldn't understand a word they were saying.
It's horrible.
Nationally, until May last year, you could buy legal highs across the counter in some shops and
so that covered some of the reasons that we touched on in terms of impact on policing, ambulances in our communities. Okay, so the next thing we're going to speak about is...
You didn't see that.
So, impact on prison services. So is that the last group? Does anyone want to share?
Well, gangs. I mean, in prison, you've got dealers in there. You have inter-gang warfare because they're trying to control the market in there. Prisoners getting into debt, and the impacts of that. You know what I mean? Violence, it was great. But when the dealer demands payment and that person hasn't got it, it's usually exacted by threats of violence.
Yeah.
Impacts on prison officers because of the increased levels of violence, and just the whole general corruption of the system in that, you know what I mean, the market that's been created for the drugs undermines everyone's morale in the prison, yeah, especially prison officers, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So you covered a lot of the main reasons that we had there. So, the impact of NPS on prison systems is severe, and we do see a much higher rate of NPS use within prisons than in communities at present. So, as you mentioned, and as covered on this slide, the impact can broadly be categorised under 4 areas. So I'm not sure if you can read this, but unpredictability of the drugs, debt, bullying, and violence. So, in terms of unpredictability, 62% of respondents in the user voice survey conducted in 2016 said that violence is a consequence of using spice. So as we discussed earlier, spice affects everyone differently, and the way they react can be unpredictable. So a quote from one service user: "The violence, when they take it, that person is in a different frame of mind. One minute they could be the nicest person to be around, but when they take it, they're like a monster." So this is quite a strong quote there. So NPS this not only increases the risk of harm to the self in terms of self-harming and suicide to escape the mental health effects of NPS, but also increases the risk of violence to others. So like you said, increase in violence on other prisoners, on staff, on treatment staff, and so forth. So in terms of debt, 77% of respondents in the user voice survey responded that debt results from using NPS. So spice costs up to 10% more in prisons compared to in the community. This means that dealers can buy a batch for around £100, for example, and sell it for £1,000. Makes them a quick profit. So if prisoners get into debt, there's a lot of effects that can happen around this. So they may steal from others to fund their spice habit, and this can cause a negative cycle. So if prisoners are caught or suspected of using NPS, they can't access their private funds as a punishment for this. So this can lead to a negative cycle and a culture of debt and intimidation and such, as you spoke about. So another quote from a service user here: "The prison is making a culture of debt. If you have suspicion of spice, you lose your basics, so you end up in debt for spice, then it just continues. then more debt causes you to have no money, but you need spice. So that reflects on everything you kind of said there. In terms of bullying and violence were often carried out upon users who had not paid their debts in prisons, but also upon prisoners who were off their heads on spice, particularly vulnerable people. So, for example, those who are mentally ill. This can often involve spiking people with spice or humiliating those they know can't, like the prisoners know can't afford it. There are also reports of spice being spiked with cannabis, so individuals test positive on mandatory drug tests. As a result of this, they can lose privileges, have time added onto their sentence, and lose out on getting parole. So some of the effects can be quite drastic within the prison system. So the effects of NPS-related violence are severe, as we've discussed. So the number of prisoner assaults in 2006 was 11,530. This rose dramatically in 2015 to 15,511, which actually was a record high. The number of prisoner on staff assaults also rose. So in 2006, this was 3,530, and this rose to 4,936 in 2015. So, as we can see, NPS are causing massive issues around violence, both between prisoners and also between prisoners and prison staff and treatment staff.
Okay. So it's all a bit grim, really, at the moment. So what can we do to help people stop using NPS? There is a lot that can be done in prison and the community. At RAPT, we get told time and time again how important peer support is for helping people recover from drug and alcohol misuse. Peer support can also help with NPS, especially in prisons, because since the introduction of the PSA, prisoners are worried about getting stitched up if they go to a prison support service to get help for their NPS use. And what peer supporters can do is they can provide confidential support to individuals as well as help them engage with treatment. And peer supporters can act as role models to NPS users. If they see their peers not using drugs and achieving things, it will encourage them to do the same. There are also a number of psychosocial interventions available to support NPS users, and these can focus on harm reduction, utilising service users' strengths, and also therapy. RAPT provide these interventions, and they have been proven to reduce reoffending and maintain abstinence upon release from prison. RAPT's interventions are designed to support people with addiction of any sort, so they're not substance specific. So an NPS user can go on the same programme as a heroin user or someone who's dependent on alcohol. Our accredited programmes have a completion rate of approximately 70%. And we did some analysis of NPS users, and roughly 65% complete our programmes, which is a really promising figure. So this shows that the existing psychosocial interventions out there that people are delivering can effectively target NPS use. Project Neptune, as you may know, have published clinical guidelines on how to treat the harms associated with the different types of NPS. So there is also pharmacological support available to help people stop using. As we mentioned before, providing meaningful activity is essential to reducing the number of prisoners using NPS. At RAPT, we've developed a range of interactive in-cell packs for prisoners and community workbooks for our service users in the community. And these have proven to be especially valuable for prisoners when they're locked up for long periods of time. And they cover specific topics such as NPS and other drugs, but they're also health and well-being focused. So we have some on anger, mindfulness, coping with triggers, and mindfulness and stress and anxiety management. We also have distraction packs when people are suffering with symptoms that they're struggling with and they feel they can't get help for. We have these packs, and they involve things like puzzles and mindful colouring to help keep people occupied in the short term. Another initiative that we've worked on is called See Life Clearly at HMP Rochester. So to get more NPS users to engage with our substance misuse service, we work with the prison to provide different activities for prisoners. we introduced Tai Chi, yoga, as well as the opportunity to look after chickens. And so making these interventions not specifically about NPS or the substances has actually seen a huge increase in self-referrals to our services.
Okay. So in addition to the factors that Hattie's spoken about there are several other ways in which we can help people to stop using NPS. So links with community services are really, really important. So although the majority of prisoners report only using NPS in prison and return to their preferred substance of choice in the community, some do continue to use it after release. Therefore, it's essential that NPS users in prison are made aware of the support that they can access on release, and that they're aware of how to access this and where to go. As with other substances, individual care plans for NPS users can be continued in the community so that they don't have to start from scratch all over again. So this is, again, really important. Another important factor is support from friends and family. So we touched on this earlier in terms of the impacts. So having support from family and friends can really make a difference to reducing and abstaining from substances, no matter what this is, so if it's NPS or more traditional drugs. Many people still think that NPS is safe to use, as the term legal highs still gets bandied around in the media and by users sometimes. So it's really important that we increase awareness that these drugs aren't safe. RAPT and other substance misuse services have created guides to the Psychoactive Substances Act, so friends and family are aware of the consequences of sharing NPS with their loved ones. Friends and family support services also provide information on the dangers and consequences of NPS to increase awareness. Increased awareness of substance misuse services in prisons and community treatment services, and awareness of the different types of support available is also really important in terms of training prison staff, prison officers, treatment staff, as in addition to educating the users. So, spoken about increased awareness a bit there. This is important to stress that this is key within prisons and also in the community. So within prisons, staff shortages, restrictive regimes and operational pressures that were imposed in the economic crisis have coincided with increasing use of NPS. So this has led to an increase in violence and increase in instances of self-harm. In practice, this has left a limited number of often new and inexperienced prison officers to manage a growing and unfamiliar problem. And this can prevent them from doing their work and make it really difficult for them to tackle the issue of NPS. Additionally, latest guidance from NOMS shows that NPS use or suspected use should be dealt with punitively in order to show users that there is an outcome for them using these drugs and that there is a consequence. So within communities, as we've discussed, equipping treatment staff and users with information on the risks of NPS, as well as family members and those who may come into contact with users in other services, is essential in ensuring effective prevention and treatment for NPS use.
Okay, so that's pretty much it from us. We just thought we'd share with you a couple of slides. Just a couple of documents that have been published recently about research and best practice. So Project Neptune, which we already discussed, and this is looking at clinical practice as well as psychosocial practice, and it provides advice for clinicians in different frontline services. The Home Office produced a resource pack for practitioners last year with a focus on young people using NPS, and Addaction also produced best practice recommendations for addressing NPS use in young people, and that kind of focuses on technology and social media a bit more. So I'll leave that up there. I'll just quickly flick to the next screen. We've also produced a guide to the Psychoactive Substances Act, and we have a number of resources available as well, such as our new Psychoactive Substances workbook. But yeah, that's it from us. So if anyone's got any questions, please go ahead and ask. Yeah.
I want to know if there will be more officers in prison. Do you think there will be a reduction of people taking legal counsel? They can go to the recovery wings or the activities, there will be an increase of the people taking illegal highs?
So, was the first part, do you think there'll be more officers in
Yes.
prison? So, I know the prison service are trying to recruit more prison officers. I don't know how successful this is at the moment. I think partly because originally it's not as prison officers don't get paid as much as they did before all the cuts came into effect a few years ago. But I know some prisons are doing have different recruitment strategies. And I know at Wandsworth Prison, they've managed to get quite a few applicants in now. I don't know how suitable they are. This was anecdotal evidence I heard, but I think they need to think about their recruitment strategy, especially as in the media you see all these reports of people getting assaulted and how dangerous it is to be in prisons at the moment. So I think they are trying to get more prison officers, but I don't know how successful they are at that at the moment. And then, so what was the second part of the question?
It will be more officers. You think people will take more illegal highs if they can do to the recovery wings, or they can go to the activities, or they are not that bored, like you mentioned before?
Yeah, so I think if there are more officers, prisoners will have more time to access purposeful activity, definitely, because. And then if there's more officers and they're intercepting more of the deliveries of NPS, you then have less people using them and less people having these major incidents, which then locks down a wing and that the prison officers have to deal with. So I think if there are more prison officers, I think it will improve the situation, yes. Yeah.
You might have said, but can I just add a wee bit more on the urine drug test then? Which prisons are doing it? Is it effective? And can they keep track of all the different molecules? Are the dealers one step ahead? Could you give us maybe just a wee bit of a flavour of where that's at?
Yeah, so I know that there are tests available, and some prisons now have them. I don't think every prison has them, and the extent of how many NPS they can detect is unclear. They seem to be able to detect some of the more common strains of spice and the different compounds in that. But I don't know. I still think they are behind. I think they will still be behind the drug dealers for a while because it took them this long. So as we said at Swaleside, they only got the tests in April, and NPS has been a problem for like 3-4 years now. So I think it's always going to be behind the manufacturers. But they do seem to be picking up a lot of people that use it. Because it's early days, I'm sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer.
Do you think there's any advantage to testing people?
I think there's an advantage if it means you then get referred to treatment, and it could potentially be used as an engagement tool. And it also gives people a clearer picture of what people might actually be taking.
Just the downside is that if you're in a punitive context, then you're going to exacerbate the problem.
Yes.
And from what you said, it seems that treatment is increasing connectivity to other people using psychosocial approaches. And if people are viewed as being in the wrong, if they can't have a positive drug test and they're segregated, it's just going to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, definitely. So in a couple of our services, it's by no means widespread. What they do is if they are tested and they do are found positive, I think if they engage in treatment, then the punitive aspect is diminished quite dramatically. So I think if you're found to use it and you actually go and seek help and do something about it, there's less. It's more therapeutic than punitive. Yeah.
I think it can be an advantage for the person if he's tested positive and then goes into treatment in prison, and he can go and become an excuse and with an advantage in his sentence review.
Yeah.
You mentioned China and India as being kind of the two biggest suppliers. Do they still deem these substances as legal? And is there any relationship between your organisation and organisations there to kind of limit the problem in the supply?
Oh, okay. Well, we don't really get involved with the supply side of things, just because our RAPT is all about just kind of treating people, so we don't really get involved in the supply. So no, we are not involved with people from China or India manufacturing them. I know there are some research groups that have been set up, and they're trying to work with some of the manufacturers. I know you may have heard there's this guy in Holland called Dr. Z, and he reckons he produces like 2 new psychoactive substances a week or something, and then he sends them off to China, and China make it, and then he tests them. If he likes the effect, he'll then pass it out to his guinea pigs, and then if that works, then he puts them on the market. And so I know that there are some research groups trying to work with him at the moment, but RAPT ourselves, we are not involved in that.
I think we had a question at the back.
My understanding, the reason they were originally called Legal Eyes is that the government would, or the authorities would ban a certain formula, and then they would slightly tweak that so that it then became legal. Is it now generically illegal to produce a new psycho?
Yeah.
So that's what it is now. It's just illegal to produce those substances.
Yes, I think
with the intention of altering somebody's mood.
Essentially, yeah. So I think it covers
that's what I was-
production, supply, and use.
So no, you won't get penalised. You won't get a criminal record for using it. You'll only get it if you are caught, if you're dealing it. But in prison, possession of MPS, you will get punished.
Right, so it would be like a tobacco ban. If there's a tobacco ban in prison, they're coming in some prisons. To be in possession of tobacco is breaking the rules.
Class as an unauthorised article. That's what it used to be classed as. It's changed now. If you get, because unauthorised article, you get extra days now. And if you fail your MDT, it's like any other substance. You'll get extra days for using it. So.
Okay.
Is there any indication of the impact on physical and mental health long term?
So we don't know at the moment because they've only been out for a few years, but there are some people, we've heard lots of case studies where someone smoked spice once and then they've got early onset dementia, things like that. But as we said, because it affects different people in different ways, and they've only been on the market for a short amount of time, we don't know exactly what the long-term effects are. The short-term effects are awful, so I can't imagine that the long-term effects are particularly good either, but we haven't found anything definitive just yet.
Because of some of the ingredients, like you said, nail polish, remover, plastics, surely a medical professional or chemist would be able to give some indication of what that would be. What do the health professionals that are at the point of contact with people overdosing and this stuff? How do they deal with it?
So they tend to treat the symptoms of what people are coming in with, because it's not always clear what someone has taken. I mean, someone might think they've taken spice, but they've actually taken something else. And if you don't see them in enough time to test them in a hospital, say, you then just have to treat the symptoms that you're presented with and go from there. So that's the advice, and that's kind of the main advice in Project Neptune, as far as I'm aware, is that you deal with the symptoms. I mean, I can't really go too much into the clinical stuff because I'm not clinically trained, but the main message is the symptoms. Yeah, same. Okay, yeah?
Yeah, just, I mean, since the media started to get interested in NPS, there's been a moral panic. I remember the stuff early on with Meows and the reports, especially the tabloid press, which seems now to be being echoed in some of the stuff around the spice. I mean, the images that they show could well be people drunk, that sort of verifies that these people are actually sort of on the drugs. So I'm just trying to sort of separate that, and also the issue that there's a much deeper crisis within the prison system itself. But is just from the the scant research that actually exists around this drug at the moment, is there a definite problem with it if you can sort of separate it from all the sort of furore surrounding it in the media?
So in prisons, definitely. In all the HMIP, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons reports, so I think it was in 2014, they said a third of prisons had a serious issue with NPS use. It is now in 2015 it was 2/3 of prisons. And now in our prison system there is an assault every 25 minutes, and they think NPS is a massive contribution to this, like one of the causes of this. So in prisons it is definitely a really bad problem. Some prison governors like to think that they've dealt with the problem and it's not an issue anymore, but it still seems to be. It kind of fluctuates as well. It depends on what.
So there is evidence to say that the drug itself causes people to be aggressive.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's lots of evidence saying about all like the kind of the mental effects that it can have. So yeah, it can be quite scary.
The user voice report that we referenced, that covers kind of service user perspectives and people having used the drugs, and that's the real theme of that, is the violence and aggression resulting from using NPS.
Mm-hmm. And then in the community, there are far fewer NPS users than there are users of other more traditional drugs, and I think it's a lot less clear how much of a problem it is in the community. I think because it hit the prison so quickly and so dramatically, I think there's been more research and work done into how to tackle it there. In the community, because it's kind of more popular in the kind of more vulnerable populations, such as the homeless. Like they're kind of the main people you saw in those Panorama videos and stuff. So it is causing a problem, it is impacting on our health services and our support services, but the true scale of it in the community, it's not 100% clear, but I think, like you said, the media have kind of jumped on it a bit.
A certain prison still offering people reduced sentences if they're tested clean while in prison, but the tests are only tested for the more traditional drugs, which may allow for an increase in use in spice on sort of so-called drug-free wings.
I don't know about reduced sentences, to be honest. I haven't heard of that myself.
People on remand.
Oh, on remand. I don't know. But I know in drug recovery wings, they take a more therapeutic stance to it than a punitive one. So we have, in some of our prisons, there's specially trained officers that they have these badges with like a symbol on, so you know that you can go and talk to them and tell them you're having a problem with NPS, and you won't get penalised for it. Okay. Any more questions?
There is this drug that apparently flooded Australia and Southeast China, also developed in China called ice. I wonder if you come across this drug in here, and if yes, can you say more about that?
Is it ice? Is it like crystal meth?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. We haven't had, well, from looking at the data from our service users, we only have a very small handful of people using crystal meth. We haven't heard anything about ice specifically. So I know it is a big problem in like Australia and New Zealand, but no, I haven't heard about it here, sorry.
Just as a matter of interest, in a large methadone clinic where we have 1,500 patients, we estimate it's like 45% of the patients are using methamphetamine.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
Could you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
Working at a large methadone clinic, we see there's about 1,500 patients of London, Ontario, and this clinic, estimate about 45% of those patients prescribed methadone or buprenorphine are using crystal meth. It's an epidemic proportions. It's very serious. So much so that we're about to introduce a safe injection site, because in London, Ontario, the incidence of HIV has started to rise again. The government's approach has been to try just to introduce methadone to curtail the spread of HIV, and now they've definitely done that, started to withdraw a certain amount of funding. It's false economy, because the incidence of HIV rising again has probably due to the injecting of crystal meth.
Wow.
Which causes unbelievable premature aging. They look 20 years older within about 5 years of use.
Gosh. Okay.
Not considered an MPS, are you?
No, but it just was the gentleman mentioned
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
crystal meth.
No, I was just wondering if that's what you saw.
That is also getting into the jails, through drones.
Okay. Anyone else have a question?
Quick one. Is there an overlap with so-called smart drugs and NPS? Because you're talking very much
Yes.
about the prison population. But actually, some of the smart drugs are also classified as NPS.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and that's we're seeing loads of that in like student populations. It's a really big thing. So I think a lot of smart drugs are now NPS. And that's also part of the problem with the name NPS, because most of them aren't new or novel. They've just been kind of recategorised. So yeah.
But smart drugs are actually NPS. Most of them are.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay.
Can you just tell me what's the difference? What's a smart drug?
It's the things like modafinil, it's the drugs that are very common in universities that people are taking to do their work on, basically stimulate their brains instead of doing what they used to do, just next week caffeine.
But a lot of that would just show up on the traditional drugs. That's what
yeah, they just show up if the quantity is
Yeah. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, thanks very much.